In the Old West, legends are carved into history through violence. But few stories are as dark, unsettling, and enigmatic as that of Johnny Ringo. His life came to an end beneath a lonely oak tree, under tragic circumstances, with a revolver still resting in his hand. The official ruling declared it an act of desperation. But the truth, much like the life of the man himself, is far more complex. To truly understand the ending, we must return to the tragic beginning. If stories like this captivate you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. The origin of the shadow. The youth of Johnny Ringo. The name Johnny Ringo echoes across the dusty plains of American history, a figure wrapped in mystery, often more myth than man. Seen by some as a melancholic gunman with a taste for literature, a so-called gentleman outlaw, and by others as a cold-blooded killer without mercy. The truth about John Peters Ringo is far more complex, forged in family tragedy and baptized in the violence of one of the most brutal feuds in Texas history. To understand the legend, we must first unearth the man himself, beginning with his roots and the path that forever diverted him from the possibility of an ordinary life. John Peters Ringo was born on May 3, 1850, in Greens Fork, Indiana. He was the firstborn son of Martin and Mary Peters Ringo. The Ringo family enjoyed a reputation of respectability and was relatively well educated for the time. In 1856, they moved to Liberty, Missouri, seeking new opportunities. However, the call of the West proved irresistible, and in 1864, the family, now with 5 children, joined a wagon train and embarked on a grueling journey of more than 3,000 kilometers toward California. For John, a 14-year-old boy, the journey began as a grand adventure. It would soon become a nightmare that would mark his soul forever. On July 30, 1864, as the wagon train crossed Wyoming territory, tragedy struck. While stepping down from his wagon, Martin Ringo stumbled. The 12-gauge shotgun he carried by the barrel fell, discharged accidentally, and killed him instantly, right before the eyes of his wife and children. Young John Ringo was the first to reach his father's lifeless body. The family was forced to bury Martin in a shallow grave beside the trail and continue their journey the very next day. The psychological impact of such an event on an adolescent is impossible to measure. The image of his father dying so suddenly and violently became a permanent shadow in John's existence. While never formally documented, it is a plausible interpretation that this trauma played a decisive role in the darkness that would later consume him. Led by the widowed Mary Ringo, the family eventually completed the journey and settled in San Jose, California. For several years, life appeared to stabilize, but unrest grew within John. In late 1869, at just 19 years old, John Ringo left California behind and traveled alone to Texas, a land still wild, filled with men seeking fortune or courting trouble. It was there that the once quiet young man began to transform into the gunman history would remember. The Texas Crucible. By 1874, Ringo had settled in Mason County, Texas, a region on the brink of violent collapse during what became known as the Mason County War, also called the Hoodoo War. Ringo quickly aligned himself with the American faction and became a close friend and primary ally of Scott Cooley, a former Texas Ranger. It was in this environment that Ringo's darker side fully emerged. He soon became associated with the violence of the conflict and was suspected of involvement in several killings related to the war, including those of Mose Baird and James Chaney. Although direct evidence was scarce, his reputation as a dangerous man was firmly established. In 1876, during a crackdown on the conflict, Ringo was arrested. But law enforcement in Mason County was weak, and with the help of his allies, he escaped custody, solidifying his status as an outlaw. The boy who once watched his father die on a lonely trail was now walking a violent path of his own, one that would take him even farther, deep into the dark heart of the Old West. The Arizona Gunman, rise to notoriety. After escaping the law in Texas, the Mason County War left Johnny Ringo with a reputation marked by blood and few prospects for the future. Texas had become too small and too dangerous for a man like him. As the 1870s drew to a close, Ringo turned his gaze westward once more, toward the newly formed Arizona Territory. It was a land of promise and anarchy, where the law was often enforced by the barrel of a gun, the perfect stage for a man like Johnny Ringo. By 1879, he arrived in Cochise County, a boiling cauldron of tension between miners, ranchers, speculators, and outlaws, all drawn by the silver wealth of Tombstone. In Arizona, Ringo quickly found his place. His reputation preceded him, and he was soon welcomed by the most powerful outlaw faction in the region, the Cowboys. Far from simple cattle hands, the Cowboys were a loose confederation of ranchers and cattle thieves, informally led by figures such as Curly Bill Brocious, Old Man Newman Haynes Clanton, and his sons Ike and Billy, as well as Frank and Tom McLaury. They controlled vast stretches of territory and operated a lucrative smuggling operation moving stolen cattle from Mexico. Ringo's intelligence and cold demeanor set him apart within the group. Unlike many of his companions, he was known as a voracious reader, with a particular fondness for Shakespeare and other classical works, giving him an aura of dangerous sophistication. Yet this cultivated side was often overshadowed by his volatile temperament, especially when alcohol was involved. Periods of deep melancholy were frequently followed by sudden, unpredictable violence. In December 1879, Ringo reinforced his fearsome reputation during an incident in a saloon in Safford, Arizona. When local rancher Lewis Hancock refused to drink with him, Ringo, deeply offended, drew his revolver and fired at point-blank range. The bullet passed through Hancock's ear and neck. Miraculously, he survived. Ringo was arrested, but in a clear demonstration of the fragile nature of frontier justice, he was ultimately acquitted. The message was clear. Johnny Ringo was a man who tolerated no insult and was willing to use lethal force over the smallest provocation. Vengeance and collapse, the twilight of the Cowboys. After the gunfight at the OK Corral on October 26, 1881, the conflict escalated into open warfare. Though absent from the shootout, Ringo emerged as one of the most dangerous figures among the now demoralized Cowboys. The ambush of Virgil Earp and the murder of Morgan Earp pushed Wyatt Earp beyond the limits of the law. Justice would now be taken by force. Wyatt launched his infamous vendetta ride, a relentless campaign across Arizona. Johnny Ringo stood high on the list of targets. Though he and Doc Holliday famously confronted one another in Tombstone, the legendary duel never occurred. Only hatred, threats, and unfinished business. The Cowboys were hunted down one by one. The death of Curly Bill Brocious in March 1882 shattered the faction completely. Ringo was left alone, a man without allies, without purpose, and without a war left to fight. By the summer of 1882, Johnny Ringo was a shadow of his former self. With the Cowboys dismantled and the Earp brothers gone, he was dangerously isolated. Alcohol became his refuge, and his behavior increasingly erratic. In early July, Ringo left Tombstone and rode toward the Chiricahua Mountains. 2 weeks later, on July 13, 1882, his body was found beneath a large oak tree in Turkey Creek Canyon. He was seated, his revolver in his hand, a single gunshot wound to the temple. The coroner ruled it suicide, but questions lingered. No powder burns, a missing horse, a rifle leaning nearby. And so, the mystery was born. Was it despair or murder? Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Frank Buckskin Leslie, all were suspected. None were proven. Johnny Ringo passed into legend, not merely as an outlaw, but as a tragic figure. A literate man consumed by violence, whose life ended in a mystery the Old West never solved.